I'm Benjamin Hayes, 32 years old, and Des Moines, Iowa is home. It's a quiet city, not too big, not too small, and that's just how I like it. I work in it, mostly dealing with networks and servers. It's a job that requires a lot of patience, a keen eye for detail, and a good memory for obscure error codes. You could say those same qualities apply to my personal life. I like things straightforward, dependable. I've always believed in honest dealings and people saying what they mean and meaning what they say. Maybe that's why what happened next hit me so hard. I'd met Sarah about 2 months prior. She was lively with a laugh that could fill a room and an easy smile. We hit it off quickly. Our relationship was new, still in that exciting getting-to-know-you phase. We had our typical silly arguments, the kind that all couples have: where to eat, what movie to watch, who left the toilet seat up. But we always moved past them, usually with a laugh and an apology. I thought we were building something real, something solid. I trusted her. When she told me early on that she had a few guy friends she'd known for years, I didn't blink. It seemed perfectly normal. Everyone has friends, and I'm not the kind of guy who gets jealous without a reason. Trust for me is the foundation of everything. That foundation started to crack one evening when we were staying at a hotel. It was a weekend getaway, just us, a chance to escape the everyday for a bit. We were relaxing, just talking, when her phone buzzed. 2 notifications popped up on the screen. I couldn't see the messages themselves, just the name of the sender. It was a guy's name. I didn't think much of it, not at first. My mind went back to what she'd said about her longtime guy friends. It made sense, right? Quick text from a buddy, nothing to worry about. I figured she'd tell me if it was important. I trusted her. That word kept echoing in my head, trust. A week later, that trust was put to the test. We were on the phone, just chatting about our day, when I heard another voice in the background. It was her mom, and then I heard a question that made my blood run cold. Who are you going on holiday with? Her mom asked it so casually, like it was an everyday thing, but it wasn't to me. I was completely caught off guard. Holiday with whom? My stomach twisted. I tried to sound casual, but my voice probably had an edge to it. What was that about, Sarah? Holiday? She hesitated. A long, uncomfortable silence stretched between us. She refused to tell me at first, dodging my questions, trying to change the subject, but I pressed her. I'm not a confrontational person by nature, but this felt different. This felt like something important was being hidden. The longer she resisted, the more certain I became. We ended up arguing, a real argument, not one of our silly little spats. Her voice became defensive, mine grew frustrated. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, she admitted it. She had booked a trip with her ex-boyfriend, an ex-boyfriend from 10 years ago. 10 years, my mind reeled. She insisted they were just good friends. She said he'd always been there for her. The trip, she swore, was strictly platonic, just 2 old friends catching up, seeing the world. My gut screamed otherwise. Platonic, with an ex from 10 years ago, after 2 months of dating me. I told her I wasn't comfortable with it, not at all. We went back and forth, a painful dance of accusations and denials. She eventually reluctantly agreed to cancel the trip. The relief I felt was mixed with a bitter taste. Why did it have to be so hard? Why the secrecy in the first place? My suspicion, once awakened, wouldn't sleep. I needed to know. I asked to see their messages. I braced myself for what I might find. What I saw at first was surprisingly bland. Basic hellos, slow replies, a casual back and forth. It seemed almost too normal. And then there it was, his random question, want to go on holiday? And her quick, simple reply, yes. No discussion of destinations, no dates, just a swift agreement to a secret trip with a man who was supposed to be a decade in her past. But that wasn't the only thing. Buried in the mundane chat, completely out of context, was a photo. A random photo of her legs sunbathing in her backyard. He hadn't asked for it. There was no preceding conversation about tanning, about her yard, about anything that would prompt such a picture. And he hadn't even responded to it. No comment, no emoji, nothing. He just carried on with the casual chat days later as if it had never been sent. It was like she tossed it into the conversation just to see if it would stick, or perhaps to make a point only she understood. It felt like parts of the conversation were missing. Like there was more, a deeper layer beneath the surface that she had somehow hidden. When I asked her about the photo, about why she sent a picture of her legs to an ex-boyfriend she claimed was just a friend and platonic, her answer was instant. It was harmless, she said, rolling her eyes as if I was being ridiculous. You shouldn't be bothered, Benjamin, he has a girlfriend. That last part, that he has a girlfriend, became a mantra for her. She repeated it endlessly like a shield against my doubts. But something in her tone, something in the way she avoided my gaze made me uneasy. My patience, usually a deep well, was running dry, so I did what my IT brain told me to do. I looked for facts. It didn't take long to find out the truth. He didn't have a girlfriend, not anymore. He was very much single. The shield she'd tried to use against my doubts shattered into a million pieces. The deception was complete, undeniable, and then the ultimate irony. After all her passionate defenses of him, how he was always been part of her life, how important he was to her, she suddenly blocked and deleted him. Just like that, the man who was supposedly so vital, so platonic, so much a friend that she'd plan a secret holiday with him, was now erased from her digital life. It was a performative act, a desperate attempt to clean up the mess she'd made, to show me she was serious about canceling, about cutting ties. But it felt hollow, forced. So there I was in the quiet of my Des Moines apartment, my world suddenly a lot less straightforward. Was I in the wrong for feeling hurt, for feeling concerned? Was I just being controlling, as she'd sometimes implied when I pushed back on things? Or was my gut right? Had I been lied to, manipulated? The cold, hard facts pointed to the latter. And the deeper I looked, the more I realized that Benjamin Hayes, a man who valued truth and trust above all else, had just been played for a fool. And that feeling, that raw, burning feeling of being deceived, was something I wasn't prepared to just let go of. Something was going to have to change. Something had to be set right. I'm Benjamin Hayes, 32 years old, and Des Moines, Iowa has been my home for as long as I can remember. It's a comfortable life, if a bit predictable. I've got a good job in software, a small house with a yard I'm slowly trying to green up, and a routine that generally involves a lot of coffee, a decent amount of coding, and weekends spent trying to escape the four walls, even if it's just to the local park. I'm not really the dramatic type, you know. I like things straightforward, honest, which is probably why what happened recently has just completely thrown me for a loop. It all started, as these things often do, with a new relationship. Her name was Sarah. We'd only been together for about 2 months, and honestly, things felt pretty good. We had our silly little arguments, sure, the kind where you're bickering about who left the toothpaste uncapped or whose turn it was to pick the movie, but we always got past them quickly. There was a lightness to it, a sense of ease that I hadn't found in a long time. I trusted her. She told me early on that she had guy friends she'd known for years, and I accepted that. I'm not the kind of guy who wants to control who his partner talks to. I believe in open communication and mutual respect. So when her phone buzzed one night while we were staying at a hotel together and 2 notifications popped up on her screen from another guy, I barely gave it a second thought. It just showed his name, not the messages themselves, but I figured it was just one of those old friends she mentioned. Nothing to worry about. Fast forward a week. We were on the phone just chatting about our days when I heard her mom's voice in the background. "Who are you going on holiday with?" she asked. The question hung in the air, sudden and sharp. My stomach dropped. Holiday with whom? Sarah went quiet on her end, and then in a rush she tried to change the subject. I wasn't having it. "What was that about Sarah?" I asked, my voice much calmer than I felt. She hesitated, fumbling for words. "It's nothing, Ben, just something my mom misunderstood." "Misunderstood what? Are you planning a trip?" I pushed, a knot tightening in my chest. This was out of character for her, this sudden evasiveness. She usually laid things out. The conversation quickly spiraled into an argument, one of the first truly serious ones we'd had. She refused to tell me for what felt like an eternity, deflecting, getting defensive. My patience wore thin. I kept pressing because something felt off, deeply off. Finally, after what felt like an hour of back and forth, her voice tight with exasperation, she admitted it. She had booked a trip with her ex-boyfriend from 10 years ago. The words hit me like a physical blow. Her ex, my mind reeled. 10 years ago, sure, that was a long time, but a trip alone, it just didn't sit right. She immediately launched into an explanation, almost a practice speech. "Ben, I swear it's nothing like that," she insisted, her voice gaining a pleading tone. "We're just good friends. He's always been there for me, you know, through thick and thin. This trip is strictly platonic. We're just catching up like old friends do. Platonic." The word echoed in my head, thin and unconvincing. I wasn't comfortable with it, not one bit. I told her that clearly. I explained that it felt disrespectful, that it crossed a line, especially so early in our relationship. How could I trust someone who was secretly planning a holiday with an ex and only told me when her mother accidentally let it slip? We argued for a long time, circling the same points. She insisted on the innocence of it. I insisted on my discomfort. Finally, after a lot more back and forth, a reluctant agreement emerged. She would cancel the trip. A fragile sense of relief washed over me, but it was quickly replaced by a lingering unease. If it was so innocent, why the secrecy? Why the fight? Why the resistance to telling me? My mind kept going back to those notifications on her phone from the hotel. I had a gut feeling. "Can I see your messages with him?" I asked, trying to keep my voice neutral, not accusatory. I needed to see for myself, to put my mind at ease. If it was truly platonic, what was there to hide? She hesitated again, but then, perhaps seeing the resolve in my eyes, she handed over her phone. And guess what? The guy she was planning to go on holiday with, he was the same guy who had texted her while we were in the hotel. My gut had been right. I scrolled through their chat, my eyes scanning the text, my heart pounding in my chest. The conversation was, on the surface, pretty dry. Basic hellos, slow replies, a sort of casual, almost indifferent tone. Then, seemingly out of nowhere, he just randomly asked her to go on holiday. And she just as casually had agreed. No discussion of logistics, no long lead-up, just a sudden invitation and an immediate acceptance. It felt odd, disconnected from the rest of their mundane chat, but what really stood out, what made my blood run cold, was a random photo she had sent him. It was a picture of her legs, stretched out, clearly sunbathing in her backyard. He hadn't asked for it. There was no context for it. He hadn't even responded to it. He just carried on with the casual chat days later, as if she hadn't sent him a picture of her bare legs. It was like she just tossed it into the conversation as an afterthought, or perhaps as a subtle, unspoken message. It screamed missing context. It screamed something deleted. I looked up from the phone, my gaze fixed on her. "Why did you send him this?" I asked, pointing to the image on the screen. My voice was tight. She looked at the photo, then back at me, her expression unreadable. "Oh, it was harmless, Ben," she said, her tone dismissive, almost annoyed. "Don't be bothered by it. He has a girlfriend." "He has a girlfriend?" I repeated, confused. That was a new piece of information. She hadn't mentioned that before. I tried to process it, to make it fit into the picture she was painting, but it just added another layer of doubt. Why would she send a picture of her legs to someone else's boyfriend? And why did she sound so casual about it? The more I thought about it, the less sense it made. Later, I did some digging, not like full-on detective work, but just a quick search, a bit of online checking, and I found out the truth. He didn't have a girlfriend, not anymore if he ever did. She had lied to me. Another piece of the puzzle clicked into place, and it wasn't a pretty picture. And then, just as suddenly as she had admitted to the trip and handed over her phone, she changed tactics entirely. Within days, maybe even hours of our confrontation, she blocked him. She deleted him from her phone, poof, gone. This was the same guy she had made such a big deal about, the one who had always been there for her, the one who was so important to her life. Now he was just erased. It was a complete 180 and it left me reeling. So here I am, sitting in my comfortable house in Des Moines, staring at my perpetually not green enough lawn and wondering, am I in the wrong for feeling hurt and concerned about all of this? Am I just being controlling, as she sort of implied? Or is there something truly rot at the heart of this, something I need to protect myself from? The trust I had so freely given felt shattered, and I didn't know how to pick up the pieces. This wasn't a silly argument about toothpaste anymore. This felt like a fundamental betrayal, and I had no idea what to do next. My predictable life suddenly felt very unpredictable, and I was drowning in a sea of questions with no answers. The truth, I suspected, was far more complicated and far more painful than she was letting on, and I knew, deep down, that I wouldn't be able to move forward until I found it. The silence that followed her final act, blocking him, deleting him, wiping him from her digital life as if he'd never existed, was deafening. It echoed in my small Des Moines apartment, bouncing off the walls of my living room where I sat, the phone still warm in my hand. Am I in the wrong for feeling hurt and concerned about all of this, or am I just being controlling? The question, fresh from my lips, lingered in the air, a sour taste of self-doubt. She had made it sound like I was the problem, her voice tight with indignation, accusing me of stifling her friendships, her freedom. For a moment, a long, agonizing moment, I almost believed her. I'm Benjamin Hayes, 32 years old, and until a few weeks ago I thought I had a pretty good handle on things. I work in logistics for a trucking company, a job that demands a logical, systematic approach. My life in Des Moines has always been neat, orderly. Relationships, I figured, were just another system, when you learn to navigate with honesty and mutual respect. This situation was anything but. I walked to the window, staring out at the familiar grid of streets, the modest houses, the quiet hum of the city I called home. The afternoon sun, usually a comforting presence, felt accusatory, casting long shadows that mirrored the growing unease in my gut. Controlling, the word gnawed at me. Was I? All I'd asked for was honesty. All I'd wanted was a simple explanation for a secret trip, a photo, and a string of denials. Then a flicker, a memory, sharp and sudden, cut through the fog. The casualness with which she'd brushed off the photo of her legs, sunbathing in her backyard. Harmless, she'd said, he has a girlfriend. A lie, a blatant, unnecessary lie delivered with a straight face as if I were a fool. That lie more than anything began to unravel the narrative she'd spun. He didn't have a girlfriend, I'd checked. Not because I was controlling, but because her dismissive tone had felt like a challenge, a dare to uncover the truth. And the truth, once exposed, was a festering wound. The anger, slow to ignite, began to smolder. It wasn't a raging inferno, not yet, but a persistent heat beneath my skin. She had made me doubt my own sanity, my own reasonable reactions. She had manipulated, lied, and then, when cornered, had performed a theatrical deletion as if to say, see, I did what you wanted. Now leave me alone. But it wasn't what I wanted. I didn't want her to erase him. I wanted her to be truthful. I wanted her to respect me. I picked up my old baseball mitt from the corner of the room, running my thumb over the worn leather. It was a comfort object, a relic from simpler times. Playing catch with my dad in the park, the clear rules of the game, the unambiguous outcome of a thrown ball. Life felt a lot messier now. The trust, that fragile, essential foundation of any relationship, had shattered, and it wasn't me who'd wielded the hammer. The next few days were a blur of forced normalcy. I went to work, pushed numbers, sat through meetings, but my mind was a fractured landscape of replays and what-ifs. Every time she spoke, I found myself dissecting her words, searching for inconsistencies, for the telltale signs of evasion. The ease with which she could lie, the casual dismissiveness of my feelings, it was a terrifying revelation. I started seeing her not as the woman I was falling for, but as a stranger, a puzzle I suddenly had no desire to solve, only to expose. Her sudden commitment to making things right felt hollow. She was overly sweet, overly attentive, as if trying to plaster over the cracks with syrupy affection. But the foundation was gone. Every compliment felt like a bribe, every touch a distraction. I couldn't shake the image of her, basking in the sun, sending that unprompted photo, a gesture of intimacy offered freely to another man while our relationship was barely 2 months old. It wasn't just about the trip anymore. It was about the deceit, the casual disregard for my feelings, the quiet betrayal that had blossomed behind my back. I started taking longer walks after work, past the tidy lawns and blossoming trees of my neighborhood, seeking a quiet corner of my mind. It was on one of these walks, as dusk settled over Des Moines and the streetlights flickered on, that a new thought began to solidify. I wasn't controlling. I was being controlled. Controlled by her lies, by her manipulations, by the narrative she wanted me to believe, and I was tired of it. The initial sting of hurt began to morph into something colder, harder. It wasn't about getting back at her in a petty way, not about shouting or making scenes. It was about balance. It was about her understanding the consequences of her actions, not just in a superficial, I canceled the trip kind of way, but in a deeper, more personal sense. She had treated me like a pawn, like an obstacle to be bypassed, and then gaslighted me into feeling guilty for reacting. That, I decided, was unacceptable. I remembered something my dad, a man of few words but profound wisdom, once told me. Benjamin, never let anyone make you feel small for having big feelings. Your feelings are valid. What they do with those feelings, that's on them. Her actions had made me feel small, insignificant, and then blamed me for reacting to that feeling. The injustice of it simmered. I started to think not about revenge in the explosive, dramatic sense, but about revelation, about peeling back the layers of her carefully constructed facade. She thrived on secrecy, on controlling the narrative. What would happen if that control was taken away? What if the truth in its raw, unvarnished form was simply laid bare, not for me necessarily, but for others, for anyone she might deem worthy of her deceit in the future? The idea was still nascent, a whisper in the back of my mind, but it grew with each passing day. I started paying more attention not just to her words, but to her patterns, her habits, how she used her phone, what apps she frequented, the little details she let slip in casual conversation. My logistical mind, usually applied to shipping routes and delivery schedules, found a new, unsettling purpose. I wasn't just observing anymore, I was gathering intelligence. I was building a case, not for a courtroom, but for a reckoning. A quiet, calculated dismantling of the carefully crafted image she presented to the world. The quiet, suburban life I led, the predictable rhythm of my days, suddenly felt like the perfect cover. Who would suspect Benjamin Hayes, the logistics guy from Des Moines, of anything more than mild-mannered existence? But beneath the calm exterior, a resolve was hardening. She had played a dangerous game, one where she thought the rules didn't apply to her. I intended to show her they applied to everyone, especially when trust was broken and a good man was made to doubt himself. The days of me questioning my sanity were over. Now it was her turn to face the uncomfortable truth. I just had to figure out how to deliver it. It would be methodical, precise, and entirely unexpected. Just like a perfectly planned delivery right on schedule. Only this delivery wouldn't be a package, it would be a reckoning. I'm Benjamin, 32 years old, and my world, which just a few weeks ago felt like it was finally settling into something comfortable here in Des Moines, has been entirely upended. The air in my small apartment, usually filled with the comforting hum of my laptop and the distant city sounds, now felt heavy, thick with the residue of unspoken words and outright lies. Every breath I took seemed to catch in my throat, a testament to the suffocating weight of betrayal that had settled upon me. It had been a few days since the explosion, since I'd confronted Sarah about the secret trip, about the texts, about that god-awful photo of her legs sent to an ex she swore was just a friend. The argument had ended with her blocking him, a performative act that instead of reassuring me only deepened my suspicion. If he was so innocent, so platonic, so utterly unimportant as anything more than a friend, why the sudden, dramatic deletion? It reeked of guilt, a desperate attempt to cover tracks rather than genuinely address the gaping chasm she'd ripped open in our nascent trust. I kept replaying the conversation in my head, dissecting every word, every hesitation. He's always been there for me, she'd said, a phrase that twisted the knife. Always there for her, even while she was supposedly building something new with me. And the flimsy excuse for the photo, it was harmless. He has a girlfriend. The casual dismissal, the way she'd waved away my very real hurt like it was a minor inconvenience, that was what truly stung. It wasn't just the act itself, it was the complete lack of empathy for my feelings, the immediate defensiveness, the quick pivot to making me feel like the problem. Am I in the wrong for feeling hurt and concerned about all of this, or am I just being controlling? That Reddit post, the one I'd stumbled upon in a moment of desperate clarity, echoed in my mind. It felt like I was reading my own thoughts, my own agonizing self-doubt. Society, it seemed, was quick to brand men as controlling the moment they expressed discomfort or set boundaries in a relationship. But where was the line? When did a legitimate concern for honesty and respect morph into an overbearing demand? I grappled with this, pacing my living room, the familiar creak of the floorboards a monotonous rhythm to my churning thoughts. I wasn't a control freak. I was a guy who, for once, felt like he was ready to open up, to trust. My past relationships had been complicated. I'd seen my fair share of disingenuous behavior, and it had made me cautious. Maybe too cautious, some might say. But with Sarah, I'd tried to shed that skin, to believe in the possibility of something straightforward and honest. We'd only been together for 2 months, yes, but those 2 months had felt significant. We talked about futures, albeit vaguely, laughed late into the night, shared vulnerabilities. Or so I thought. The discovery about her ex not having a girlfriend hit me like a physical blow. That wasn't just a misremembered detail or a harmless omission. It was a deliberate, calculated lie. A lie told to pacify me, to minimize the situation, to make me doubt my own instincts. It proved everything I suspected, that she was willing to manipulate the truth, to twist reality just to avoid accountability. The just friends narrative crumbled entirely then, revealing the rotten core beneath. What else had she lied about? What else was she capable of hiding? Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My nights were a restless churn of replays and what-ifs. I'd stare at the ceiling, the shadows playing tricks in the corners of my room, each one morphing into a phantom of her casual smile as she spun her web of deceit. My appetite vanished, replaced by a constant knot in my stomach. Friends called, asked how things were, and I'd offer vague, noncommittal answers, unwilling to air such fresh, raw laundry. How do you explain to someone that the person you thought you were building a connection with was secretly planning a romantic getaway with an ex and sending him provocative photos, all while gaslighting you into believing you were the irrational one? The insidious nature of it gnawed at me. It wasn't a one-time slip-up. It was a pattern of behavior, the initial concealment of the trip, the reluctance to admit to it, the carefully constructed alibis, the dismissive attitude towards my feelings, and finally the blatant lie about his relationship status. Each layer peeled back revealed a deeper level of premeditation, a cold calculation that shocked me to my core. I started to see everything through this new, cynical lens. Every compliment, every shared laugh, every intimate moment suddenly felt tainted, cheapened by the knowledge of her duplicity. Was any of it real, or was I just another pawn in her game, a convenient distraction while she pursued other avenues? I found myself driving aimlessly through the familiar streets of Des Moines, past the East Village boutiques, past the bustling farmers market square, past the quiet, tree-lined residential areas. None of it offered solace. My usual haunts, the local coffee shop where I'd brainstormed ideas for my freelance design work, the park where I used to clear my head, all felt alien. My mind was a relentless echo chamber replaying scenes, searching for clues I'd missed, for red flags I'd ignored, and there were so many now that I looked back. The occasional vagueness, the quick changes of subject, the slight evasiveness when I asked about her day. I dismissed them as quirks, as normal human privacy. Now they screamed deceit. The emotional impact was profound. I didn't just feel hurt, I felt profoundly foolish. My trust, which I guarded so carefully, had been breached not by a misunderstanding but by deliberate deception. My self-worth took a significant hit. Was I so easily fooled? Was I so desperate for connection that I'd overlooked such glaring signs? The rage that simmered beneath the surface wasn't just at her, but at myself for allowing it to happen. The problem wasn't just the cheating, or the near cheating, or whatever blurred line she'd crossed. The problem was the absolute disrespect for my feelings, for our relationship, for basic human honesty. It wasn't about being controlling, it was about being treated like a fool, and I was tired of feeling like a fool. The initial shock began to crystallize into something harder, colder. The hurt began to transform into a quiet resolve. I knew with absolute certainty that I couldn't simply move on and pretend this hadn't happened. The trust was gone, irrevocably shattered. The relationship as it was dead. But the idea of simply walking away, letting her believe she'd gotten away with it, that I was just another man who was too controlling, fleeting irritation in her life, was an intolerable thought. Des Moines was a city of quiet strength, of people who worked hard and valued integrity. It was the kind of place where, if you screwed someone over, word got around. And that thought, that simple, profound truth, began to take root in my mind. How could I make her understand the depth of her actions without resorting to childish tantrums or vengeful outbursts that would only justify her accusations of me being controlling? I needed something precise, something elegant, something that would hit her where it truly mattered, without ever raising my voice or losing my composure. I needed to ensure she understood the true cost of her deception, not just to me but to herself. The goal wasn't just to hurt her back, it was to open her eyes, to make her face the consequences of her dishonesty in a way that couldn't be dismissed as my overreaction. The idea, vague at first, began to form in the quiet hours of the night. It wasn't about anger anymore. It was about justice. It was about reclaiming my dignity. And it would be, above all else, poetic. The more I thought about it, the clearer the path became. I wouldn't yell, I wouldn't accuse, I wouldn't even explain. I would simply act and let the consequences speak for themselves. The game, if she wanted to play it, was about to change. She might have thought she was in control, pulling the strings of my emotions, but she had underestimated Benjamin Hayes. She had underestimated the quiet man from Des Moines, Iowa, who, when pushed too far, knew how to make a point without uttering a single word. My lowest point wasn't the end. It was merely the calm before the storm. The feeling of utter betrayal, the sting of being gaslighted, it all served to sharpen my resolve. My focus shifted from the pain of what she had done to the meticulous planning of what I would do. The question was no longer, am I being controlling? It was, how do I ensure she truly understands what she lost and why? The answer, I realized, lay not in confrontation, but in carefully orchestrated revelation. She had lived in a world of secrets and carefully constructed lies. It was time for her world to become just as transparent, just as exposed. I began to collect my thoughts, to sort through the evidence, not for an argument but for a strategy. It wasn't about winning back a relationship that was already tainted. It was about restoring a balance, about ensuring that her actions had consequences that she couldn't simply block or lie her way out of. This quiet resolve, this cold determination, was a new feeling born from the ashes of my shattered trust. I tried to move on, really I did. After she finally blocked him, the guy who'd wanted to whisk her away on a secret holiday, the guy she swore was just a friend and had always been there for her, I thought maybe, just maybe, we could salvage something. My name is Benjamin, and at 32, living a quiet life here in Des Moines, I thought I'd finally found someone I could build a future with. The arguments we had, the silly little spats, felt like normal relationship growing pains. But this felt like a seismic shift under my feet, a crack spreading through the foundation of everything I thought we were. My life in Des Moines had always been pretty straightforward. Stable job at the insurance company, a small but comfortable apartment, a close-knit group of friends I'd known since college. I enjoyed my quiet evenings, maybe a craft beer, catching a Cubs game on TV. Weekends often involved hiking at Ledges State Park or just grilling in my backyard. I wasn't looking for drama, never had been. I valued predictability, honesty. That's why meeting her had felt so refreshing at first. She was vibrant, funny, full of energy. A stark contrast to my own quiet demeanor, and I thought, in a good way. She brought a spark, an excitement I hadn't realized was missing. Now that spark felt like a burning ember, scorching everything it touched. The silence from her end after she finally admitted the truth was deafening. She'd tried to paint it as me being controlling, tried to twist it into my fault for feeling uncomfortable. But how could I not? A secret trip with an ex from a decade ago, someone she claimed was just good friends, while she was secretly sending him photos of her legs unprompted. My mind kept replaying that detail. Her legs sunbathing. A casual, innocent act, she'd insisted. Harmless, she'd said like a mantra she hoped would magically erase the knot in my stomach, but it wasn't harmless. It felt like a deliberate act of intimacy, a subtle invitation sent to a man she was actively trying to hide from me. Then came the revelation about his girlfriend. A simple check of his social media, a quick chat with a mutual acquaintance confirmed my worst fear. He didn't have a girlfriend, not then, not ever since she and I had started dating. The lie hit me harder than the secret trip itself. It wasn't just a misdirection, it was a calculated deceit designed to make me feel irrational, to make me doubt my own instincts. She had looked me in the eye, sweet and innocent, and spun a web of fabrication. It wasn't just about the trip anymore, it was about her character, about the kind of person she truly was, hiding beneath the veneer of affection she showed me. I felt like a fool, a naive, trusting fool. Here I was, Benjamin, a man who prides himself on being straightforward, on valuing honesty, and I'd been played. The quiet comfort of my apartment in Des Moines, usually a sanctuary after a long day at the insurance office, felt oppressive. Every corner seemed to echo with her assurances, her lies. I'd sit there replaying conversations, trying to find the cracks I'd missed, the subtle tells that would have warned me. But she was good, too good. She had compartmentalized her life, neatly tucking away this friendship into a dark corner, hoping I'd never stumble upon it. The conversations replayed in my head, a constant loop of her denials, her insistence that I was overreacting. It was harmless, Benjamin, just friends, he has a girlfriend. Each phrase a little knife twisting in the wound. And I, in my desperate hope to believe her, in my foolish desire to salvage what I thought was real, had almost let her convince me. Almost. But that little voice, the one that screamed liar when she looked away, when her eyes darted, it wouldn't be silenced. It was the same voice that told me deep down that a sunbathing photo of her legs, unrequested, sent to a man she was planning a secret trip with, wasn't innocent. It was a breadcrumb, a signal, and I was the one left to find out what it truly led to. Sleep became a luxury I couldn't afford. My mind raced night after night. I'd stare at the ceiling, seeing her face, hearing her voice, each memory tainted with the bitter taste of betrayal. My appetite vanished. My friends, noticing my quietness, would ask if everything was all right. I'd just shrug, mumble something about work stress. How could I explain? How could I tell them the woman I was falling for had been planning a secret rendezvous with an ex and then lied so effortlessly about it? The shame was almost as heavy as the anger. Shame for being so easily deceived. Shame for letting myself be vulnerable to someone so dishonest. The hardest part was the isolation of it all. How do you explain to your friends that the woman you've been gushing about for the past 2 months, the one you brought to their barbecues and introduced with such pride, was capable of such cold, calculated deception? The shame kept me quiet. I couldn't bring myself to voice the raw, ugly truth, not yet. So I carried it, a heavy, invisible weight, through my days. Smiling, nodding, pretending everything was fine, while inside a storm raged. It was a lonely kind of pain, the kind that eats away at you from the inside out, making you question your own judgment, your own instincts. It wasn't just the betrayal that stung, it was the blatant disrespect. She had dismissed my feelings, minimized my concerns, and then gaslit me into questioning my own sanity. I had always been a reasonable man, calm in the face of conflict, preferring open communication. Yet with her, I felt like I was constantly navigating a minefield of unspoken truths and carefully constructed deceptions. It felt like she had taken my trust, my goodwill, and trampled all over it. And then she expected me to just pick up the pieces and pretend it never happened because she had decided it was over. But it wasn't over, not for me. I work at the insurance company, reviewing claims, looking for inconsistencies. It had always been about finding the truth hidden beneath layers of paperwork and vague statements. I was good at it, meticulous. And now I was applying that same rigorous logic to my own life, to her. It wasn't just a partner I was investigating, it was the entire framework of my recent past. Every smile, every shared laugh, every intimate moment, were they real, or were they just part of the act? Thought alone was enough to make my stomach clench, to fill my chest with a cold, hollow ache. I had let myself be completely vulnerable, and she had taken advantage of it, not just once but repeatedly, with every lie, every hidden message. The anger, at first a dull ache, began to sharpen into a keen edge. It wasn't just about being hurt anymore. It was about justice. It was about the principle of it. I'd always believed in fairness and accountability. This wasn't fair. This wasn't right. And she was walking away, seemingly unscathed, believing her apologies and tears had wiped the slate clean. But the slate wasn't clean for me. It was etched with doubt and resentment. I wasn't going to be the controlling boyfriend she painted me to be. I was going to be the man who demanded truth, even if it meant tearing down the fragile peace we pretended to have. Every interaction, every shared laugh, every intimate moment was now under a microscopic lens. I found myself obsessively replaying conversations, searching for a false note to tell anything I might have missed. That night in the hotel, when her phone buzzed with his name, I had dismissed it so easily. "Guy friends," she'd said, and I believed her, because why wouldn't I? I'd always been an open book, and I expected the same from others. But she wasn't an open book. She was a carefully constructed facade, and I was only now beginning to see the cracks. The random photo of her legs, sent without context, without a prompt, was like a loose thread on a perfectly tailored suit. Pull it, and the whole thing unravels. I felt trapped, caught between my inherent desire for fairness and the deeply unsettling realization that she clearly didn't operate by the same rules. What was the point of confronting her again, to be gaslit further, to hear more apologies that felt hollow and insincere? She had already shown her hand. She had revealed a willingness to lie, to manipulate, to hide critical truths, all for the sake of a friendship that was clearly more than that. The anger wasn't a hot, blinding rage. It was a cold, simmering resentment, growing stronger with each passing day. It settled in my bones, a constant reminder of the disrespect I had endured. This wasn't about winning an argument anymore. It was about something deeper. It was about reclaiming my dignity, about proving to myself that I wouldn't be a doormat, that my trust wasn't something to be casually discarded. The idea of getting even started to form not as a childish impulse but as a quiet, logical progression. I wasn't looking for revenge in the dramatic, movie-style sense. I was looking for consequences, for her to truly understand the impact of her actions, to feel the ripple effect of her dishonesty. And to do that, I realized I needed to be as methodical, as precise as she had been deceptive. I spent hours staring at the ceiling of my apartment, letting my thoughts wander not just to the pain but to possibilities. What leverage did I have? What were her vulnerabilities? I wasn't looking to cause physical harm or ruin her life in a grand, public spectacle. That wasn't me. I was Benjamin Hayes, a man who believed in order and logic and things being done correctly. Her actions were fundamentally illogical, chaotic, disrespectful of the implicit contract of a relationship. And my response, I decided, would be to restore that order, to bring a calculated precision to the chaos she had created. The more I thought about it, the more I realized that her casual dismissal of my feelings, her effortless lies, came from a place of arrogance. She believed she was smarter, more cunning, that she could manipulate situations and people without consequence. And that, more than anything, fueled a quiet fire within me. I wasn't a vengeful man by nature. I preferred peace, stability, but there was a line, and she had not just crossed it, she had danced all over it with a self-satisfied grin. I wasn't going to let that stand, not Benjamin Hayes of Des Moines, not anymore. I would find a way to make her understand the true cost of her harmless actions, and it wouldn't be pretty, but it would be just. And with that, her carefully constructed world crumbled. My peace finally found.